While I juggled two jobs just to survive, she lived in comfort off handouts. But one day, when fate handed me the upper hand, I didn't just turn the tables. I flipped the whole script in a way she never saw coming. Sometimes, the people who struggle in silence are the ones who rise the loudest when no one's watching. This is the story of a young man who worked two jobs just to eat, while his sister lived like royalty on handouts and praise. But when life gave him one unexpected shot, he didn't just rise. He rewrote the rules. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or left behind, this story is for you. Make sure to subscribe and hit that bell, because the tables are about to turn in a way no one saw coming. I never wanted much, just a fair shot, maybe a little recognition. But growing up in our household, fairness was a luxury I could never afford. My sister, Eliza, was the crown jewel, light-haired, soft-spoken, and conveniently talented at things that got praise but not results. Me? I was the one with the grease under my nails, the calluses on my palms, and the potential no one had time to nurture. From the moment we were kids, it was obvious. Eliza would be fed silver spoons while I'd be lucky to find plastic forks. Dad adored her. He called her his little executive, even when she was still learning to tie her shoes. She got music lessons, language tutors, and private school. I got old uniforms, community bus passes, and the advice to learn from your sister's poise. At dinner, Eliza would talk about her tennis coach or her modeling gigs, and I'd just sit there, chewing on dry rice, knowing no one would ask about my double shift at the car wash. It wasn't that I was jealous. Not at first. I was just invisible. By the time I turned 16, the pattern had hardened. Eliza wrecked her third car. A sleek red convertible Dad got her for graduating a year late. I was still riding a busted-up bike and working weekends at a grocery store just to afford secondhand textbooks. Every time I asked for help, I was told, "You're stronger. You'll manage." I did. I managed while watching her waltz through life as if gravity didn't apply to her. I managed when she laughed with her friends about my factory face and called my uniform charity wear. I managed, even though every chuckle chipped away at something inside me. College came. Eliza picked some flashy liberal arts school on the East Coast, and of course, my parents paid her tuition in full. I wasn't even consulted. I knew better than to ask. I applied to a local community college, took night classes, and worked two jobs, warehouse clerk by morning, diner dishwasher by night. I'd get home at 2 a.m., knees throbbing, hands raw from scrubbing grease, only to wake up 4 hours later for a lecture I could barely afford. And still, no one noticed. No one cared. Sometimes I'd hear Eliza's voice on the speakerphone while Mom bragged to her friends, "Eliza's in New York this weekend. A brunch event." Or, "Eliza's thinking about starting a lifestyle brand." Meanwhile, I was thinking about whether I could stretch a loaf of bread for another 2 days. My roommates knew me as the guy who never went out, never asked for favors, and always brought home leftovers from the restaurant. But deep down, I wasn't angry, not yet. I was just tired. Tired of proving myself in a world that only applauded the shiny and the loud. What I didn't realize back then was that silence could be its own kind of power. While they watched Eliza sparkle and stumble through privilege, I was quietly collecting fuel. Every ignored birthday, every unpaid favor, every empty promise, they became embers. I didn't know when or how, but something inside me had already started to change. Not with bitterness, with purpose. And that was the difference between us. Eliza was given everything but never built anything. I had nothing but was slowly learning how to build myself. Most people don't notice the guy who shows up early and leaves last, the one in the back corner of the class who never raises his hand, or the dishwasher who keeps his head down while others complain. That was me. I wasn't chasing recognition anymore. I was chasing survival, and I did it with quiet steps. Every dollar I earned had a destination. Rent, utilities, a busted laptop that I patched up with duct tape and prayer. No vacations. No breaks. Just clock in, learn, clock out, repeat. My life wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, and every sacrifice was a brick in the future I was building, one no one else could take credit for. By day, I unloaded boxes in a freezing warehouse. Gloves on, hoodie up, spine aching. By night, I sprinted to the diner and tied an apron around my waist, flipping burgers while smiling through backhanded insults from impatient customers. "You look smart. Why are you here?" They'd ask, like I owed them my resume just because I carried their fries with dignity. And when I got back to my apartment at 1:45 a.m., I didn't rest. I studied JavaScript, UX design, digital frameworks. I'd prop my eyelids open with sheer will and code until the sun flirted with the horizon. It wasn't a grind anymore. It was an obsession. Meanwhile, Eliza was living on a different planet. She dropped out of her second college because it didn't inspire her, and my parents praised her for knowing herself. She started a travel blog with no consistent posts, funded by the same people who once told me to get over my dreams and focus on stable work. On Instagram, she posed in luxury spas with captions like, "Working on me." And in the comments, Mom and Dad cheered her on like she was building empires instead of draining bank accounts. The irony? My name never came up. I didn't exist in their social circles, only in their utility bills. When Eliza maxed out her fourth credit card, they quietly refinanced their mortgage to pay it off. But when I asked for $60 to buy a used textbook, they said, "You need to learn how to budget better." So I stopped asking. I started documenting. Every slight, every ignored message, every time they forgot my birthday, I noted it. I didn't rage. I recorded. Like a silent ledger of pain that one day, I knew, might come in handy. And it wasn't about vengeance. Not then. It was about clarity. About never forgetting who had a hand on my back and who turned theirs. One night, after a particularly brutal shift, I got a message that changed everything. It was from an online mentor I'd met through a free coding forum. He was a retired CTO from a Fortune 500 company, and he'd seen some of my work. "You've got the mind of a builder," he wrote, "but you need to stop hiding your light in the shadows of survival." We started weekly virtual sessions free of charge. I didn't know it then, but this connection would become the spark that lit my future. Still, I said nothing to my family. Let them think I was still just scraping by. Let them believe Eliza was the rising star while I was the dim bulb flickering in the basement. I was used to being underestimated, and now I realized how powerful that could be. Because when people think you're nothing, they never see you coming. And so I leaned in deeper. Saved more. Learned faster. Took night contracts on freelance tech sites under a fake name. Slowly, quietly, the numbers in my savings account began to shift. Not much, but enough to whisper that something was changing. Not yet a roar, but a heartbeat. And for the first time in my life, I started to believe that maybe I wasn't just surviving, I was getting ready to rise. It started with a problem I faced at the diner, something no one else cared to fix. The ordering system was ancient and constantly glitched during rush hour. One night, while mopping floors after closing, I thought, why not build something better? That same night, I went home, sat at my desk, and opened my rusting laptop. Beneath its flickering screen, I began sketching ideas for a digital system that could sync kitchen stations, alert servers in real time, and track customer preferences. I wasn't aiming to change the world. I just wanted to solve one real problem. But that problem opened the door to something bigger. What began as a crude side project quickly grew. Between warehouse shifts and greasy plates, I stayed up coding prototypes. I called it Quick Serve, and at first, I thought I'd just pitch it to my diner manager. But my mentor, Ralph, said, "This isn't just a tool for one place. This is scalable. You've got something here." He offered to connect me with a few angel investors he still kept in touch with. I hesitated. Me? The broke guy with 2 jobs? The one whose own family barely believed he had a future? But Ralph saw something in me that no one else ever had, potential without pity. Meanwhile, Eliza was still the star of the family's group chats. She was in Ibiza now, then Greece, finding her passion. Passion looked a lot like parties, sponsored posts, and filtered photos of sunsets she hadn't even stayed awake long enough to see in person. I watched from the shadows, nodding through Mom's updates as if it didn't sting. "She's finally considering launching her brand," they said. "She just needs a little more from us this month to make it happen." More meant thousands, money that used to be for emergencies. Money they'd never give me, even if I was bleeding on their doorstep. But I stayed silent. I wanted no loans, no handouts, just space. I used every break to refine my pitch deck, update QuickServe's UI, and run test environments. I studied analytics, marketing strategies, and how to speak in a boardroom without sounding like a scared kid from the wrong side of the tracks. I wasn't just building a product, I was rebuilding myself. My language changed. My walk changed. Even the way I looked in the mirror changed. I didn't see the loser my family ignored. I saw someone who was finally waking up. Then came the email. A small tech firm in Seattle, backed by two of Ralph's former colleagues, wanted to meet. They'd seen my mock-ups, reviewed my code, and were highly interested in acquisition with optional integration into our chain partners nationwide. I stared at the screen, rereading it until tears blurred the words. I hadn't told anyone, not my roommates, not my coworkers, and definitely not my parents. It was mine, all mine, and it was real. The call happened the following week. It was late at night, after a 10-hour shift. I wore a thrift store blazer over my apron, cleaned the sauce stains as best I could, and dialed in from my bedroom. The discussion was direct. They were impressed by the system's efficiency and how it could integrate with both mom-and-pop diners and larger chains. They weren't just offering money, they were offering belief. A chance to work on my own software full-time, with a team, with equity, and with backing. By the time we ended the call, they had already sent the preliminary terms, high five figures up front, stock options, and a full-time remote developer role with flexible hours. I signed with shaking hands. Not because I was scared, because I was finally free. The next day, I didn't show up to the diner. I wrote a long thank you letter to my manager, who never knew my real name because I'd always gone by Jay to keep things separate. I dropped off my apron, walked out the back door, and stood in the alley for a while just breathing. The air smelled the same: grease, smoke, the faint staleness of cheap beer, but I didn't. I smelled like possibility. Still, I told no one. Let Eliza post another bikini shot. Let my parents believe I was still some background blur in their golden child success story. I wasn't done yet. This wasn't the time for applause. It was the quiet before the storm. They say karma doesn't send warnings, it just shows up, uninvited and unbothered. That day, it arrived like thunder wrapped in a silk ribbon. I was 3 months into my new remote role. I traded overnight diner shifts for early morning strategy calls, and every payday still felt like a dream. I no longer counted coins to buy groceries. I had groceries delivered, and yet I hadn't updated anyone back home, not out of malice, but because part of me wanted to see just how long it would take them to realize I was no longer struggling. Turns out, they weren't paying enough attention to notice. Then I got a message. It was from my mother. A short text: call when you can. Something happened with your sister. No emojis. No context. I didn't rush to reply. I had learned the hard way that every time they reached out, it wasn't because they missed me, it was because they needed something. Still, curiosity nibbled at me, so I called the next morning. Eliza had been exposed. Apparently, her luxury life was funded through sketchy consulting for a local boutique. Except the consulting was a front. She was siphoning money through fake invoices and using the boutique's business credit for personal shopping sprees across Europe. Someone finally reported her. The boutique's books didn't balance, and Eliza's name was all over the paper trail. It wasn't just messy, it was criminal. I should have felt something: panic, shame, fear. Instead, I felt still, as if all the chaos they dragged me through was being returned to sender. She's scared, Mom said, her voice tight with emotion. She's been crying for days. We don't know what to do. I nodded, listening. No, how have you been? No, what's new with you? Just a desperate need to fix the mess their favorite had made. I'm not sure how I can help, I said calmly. Didn't you say she was the one who made smart choices? There was a long silence on the other end, and for the first time in years, I didn't fill it with guilt or explanations. I let it hang like a painting in a quiet room. They didn't reply, just mumbled something about needing to sort things out and hung up. I stared at the phone for a long time after that, remembering all the nights I worked through sickness, fatigue, even heartbreak, and they never called. But the real twist came a week later. My dad, who hadn't spoken to me in nearly a year, called asking for a small favor. They were trying to settle some of Eliza's legal fees and needed to liquidate assets, but things were tight. Could I send some money to help, just until things stabilize? He spoke like I was still folding aprons at the diner, assuming I'd scrape together a couple hundred if I skipped a few meals. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I asked him to meet me. In person. He agreed, surprised, and we met at a local cafe near where I used to live, where I used to scrape gum off sidewalks and clean toilets for extra shifts. I wore a tailored black shirt and carried a laptop bag. He showed up wearing guilt like it was cologne, hugging me like he remembered how. I let him talk. About Eliza's anxiety, the legal storm, how the boutique owner had been a family friend and now things were spiraling. He asked again, gently, "Can you help her get back on her feet?" I opened my laptop, pulled up the front page of the tech journal that had just published an article about my app's rising success. Right there, my name, my company, my work. His eyes scanned it, slowly at first, then frantically, like he was realizing just how much he didn't know about the son he used to ignore. "I'm not the one who needs help anymore," I said quietly. He said nothing. I closed the laptop, stood up, and told him I hoped Eliza would learn something from this. I paid for his coffee, shook his hand, and walked out. I didn't look back. The family meeting was awkward from the moment I walked in. It wasn't formal, just a quiet Sunday afternoon gathering at my parents' house. The same house where Eliza once held garden parties and treated me like the hired help. This time, though, the vibe had shifted. I noticed it in the way Dad stood to greet me, in the way Mom offered tea, her voice just a notch too polite. Even Eliza, who used to roll her eyes at my hand-me-down jeans, sat stiffly on the couch, wringing her perfectly manicured hands like a nervous intern. She looked dimmer, like life had finally touched her without makeup on. I sat at the table, calm, collected, laptop in my bag. No one mentioned the article, but I knew they'd all read it. My name had been trending in local startup circles, from dishwater to developer, how one young man built the future of fast dining. I didn't write that title, but I didn't mind it either. Dad cleared his throat. "Son," he started, the words sounding foreign in his mouth. "We know things haven't always been balanced. But your sister is going through a hard time now. The legal fees, the fallout, it's all more than we expected. We're trying to keep her out of jail, but we're in a bind." Eliza said nothing. She wouldn't even look me in the eye. I waited. Let the silence stretch like old wallpaper peeling off a forgotten wall. Then Mom added softly, "If there's any way you can help, even a loan, we'd pay it back." I opened my laptop. The screen lit up with the acquisition paperwork I'd finalized that morning. My company had just signed a licensing deal with 2 regional chains, meaning residual income, automatic scaling, and more money than I had ever imagined. I rotated the laptop to face them. "You won't need to pay it back," I said. They looked at each other, stunned, then relief washed over their faces. But I wasn't done, because I'm not giving you anything. The relief shattered like glass. Dad leaned forward. "Wait, what do you mean?" I leaned back in my chair. I remember when I couldn't afford a used textbook, and you said I needed to learn budgeting. I remember Eliza laughing while I picked up an extra shift so I could eat that week. And now that I have something, you think it belongs to all of us." I looked at Eliza. "You told your friends I'd never amount to anything. That I was the family labor project?" "I'm not angry. I'm just done pretending this dynamic ever worked." Mom looked like she might cry. "But we're family." I nodded slowly. "Yes, we are. And family should show up when someone's drowning, not just when they finally reach the surface." No one spoke after that. Just silence. Thick, bitter silence. I stood up, slid the laptop back into my bag, and added one final note. "There's a number on the fridge for a good legal aid attorney. I paid for the consultation already. That's my last favor." And then I walked out, not in anger, but in peace. I'd finally said everything I had carried for years. And the most satisfying part wasn't the wealth or the success, it was the clarity. The line had been drawn. The boy who once scrubbed dishes just to afford a meal had become a man who no longer served anyone who saw him as less. She showed up unannounced. It was raining that evening, a soft, steady drizzle coating the city in silver haze. I was reviewing some analytics from the new rollout when the security buzzer sounded. I rarely had visitors. I wasn't the kind of guy people dropped in on, not before, not now. I walked to the monitor, half expecting a delivery. But it was Eliza. Alone. No umbrella. Hair soaked. Eyes tired. For a long second, I just stood there, watching the screen. The girl who used to twirl in designer dresses and mock my thrift store shoes now looked like a page torn out of an unfinished apology. I buzzed her in. She stood awkwardly at the door, not sure whether to smile or sob. I didn't invite her to sit. She stepped inside and looked around, at the hardwood floors, the open loft layout, the quiet hum of comfort I had built from scratch. Her eyes lingered on the framed article near the kitchen. The local developer changing the dining game. She didn't comment. "I just needed to talk," she said quietly. I nodded. "Go ahead." She stared at the floor, gathering words. "I messed up. I know that now. I thought. I thought life was always going to hand me what I wanted. And I treated you like a joke. Like you weren't worth anything unless you had something to offer. But I see now that I was the one with nothing real. You built this, yourself. No one gave it to you. And her voice cracked. I was so wrong. She looked up then. Eyes red, lip trembling. I'm not asking for money. I swear. I need a chance. A job. A way to start over. I want to work. I don't care what it is. I'll clean. I'll learn. Just please, help me become someone better. It would have been so easy to throw her words back in her face. All the laughter, the snide remarks, the way she turned our parents' love into currency I could never afford. But something had shifted in me. I didn't need her to feel pain. I just needed her to feel real. I walked to the drawer and pulled out a card. It was for a career recovery agency, one that helped people re-enter the workforce after prison, rehab, or financial ruin. I handed it to her. They're good people, I said. They'll give you a fair shot. Just like I never got. She stared at it, fingers trembling. That's it. That's it. No anger. No fanfare. Just boundaries. She nodded slowly. Then something unexpected happened. She didn't cry. She smiled a small, honest smile. Maybe the first real one I'd seen on her face in years. Thank you, she whispered, and left without another word. The door clicked shut behind her. I didn't watch her walk away. I returned to my desk, finished my report, and prepared for my next meeting. That was my closure. Not revenge. Not vindication. Just peace. You've walked with me through silence, struggle, and the rise that came after being overlooked for too long. This wasn't just about success. It was about finally being seen. If stories of quiet power, resilience, and earned respect move you, hit that subscribe button. There's more to come, more stories of grit, truth, and the beautiful sound of tables turning. Stay with me.